Welcome to Journey Through Time, the channel where we bring the past to life, one epic story at a time. Today, we invite you to step into the pages of history like never before, from the great battles that shaped empires, to the revolutions that ignited change, and the incredible figures whose legacies still influence us today. Here at Journey Through Time, we're not just about dates and events. We dive deep into the heart of each moment, exploring the courage, ambition, and sometimes even the chaos that defined these pivotal eras. Picture yourself on the battlefield with Napoleon as he faces his final stand at Waterloo, or walking through the streets of ancient Rome as the Republic crumbles into an empire. We don't just tell history, we make you feel it. Our goal is to make history more than just a subject from school. It's the story of us all, filled with drama, triumphs, defeats, and lessons that still resonate today. Every episode is crafted to pull you into the experience, with visuals, stories, and insights that will leave you thinking long after the video ends. So, whether you're a history buff, a curious explorer, or someone who just loves a good story, you've come to the right place. Hit that subscribe button, and let's embark on this thrilling journey through time together. History is waiting for you, and it's more exciting than you've ever imagined. Let's uncover the past, one extraordinary moment at a time. In 1799, France, a military man rose from a relatively poor Corsican island, using his astonishing intellect and military prowess. He became France's savior, hailed as a hero, but less than 20 years later, this once invincible emperor fell at Waterloo, and his empire crumbled overnight. This is Napoleon's legend, from meteoric rise to eventual downfall. Today, we delve into this dramatic tale of power, strategy, and courage. Napoleon Bonaparte, born on the island of Corsica, was a young man who showed remarkable talent early on. He rose quickly through the ranks of the French military academy, becoming an artillery officer. In the turbulent times of the French Revolution, he seized his opportunity, gaining fame through successful campaigns against Austria and Britain. In the spring of 1796, a young Napoleon Bonaparte stood at a critical turning point. At the age of just 26, he had been appointed by the French government as the commander of the Army of Italy. Europe was in turmoil following the French Revolution, with the nations of the anti-French coalition watching France with growing hostility. Among these, Austria stood as the most formidable enemy, yet, the army that France had assigned to Napoleon was poorly equipped, demoralized, and on the brink of collapse, with soldiers suffering from hunger and cold, barely able to continue fighting. However, it was with this seemingly ragtag group that Napoleon, over the next few months, managed to defeat both Austria and its ally, the Kingdom of Sardinia, completely changing the course of the Italian campaign and earning himself unparalleled renown. The story begins with the Battle of Montenotte. Faced with a well-trained and numerically superior Austrian army, Napoleon decisively adopted a strategy of divide and conquer. He realized that if the enemy forces united, the French had no chance of victory. Therefore, he decided to disrupt the enemy's plans through swift and precise maneuvers. Despite the soldiers being famished and in tattered clothing, Napoleon inspired them with a simple but powerful speech: "You are tired of poverty and hunger, but victory is within reach. There, you will find honor, wealth, and fresh bread." This speech reignited the soldiers' fighting spirit. Sure enough, at Montenotte, under Napoleon's command, the French forces quickly shattered the Austrian defenses. This victory offered France a glimmer of hope and gave the enemy its first glimpse of the young commander's fearsome potential. Napoleon then advanced northward, facing the main Austrian forces. At Lodi, he led his troops in a daring crossing of the river Adda, braving enemy fire. Napoleon stood at the front line himself, leading the charge. The scene was unforgettable. His soldiers, moved by their commander's courage, followed him into battle. Napoleon understood that wars were not merely contests of weapons and tactics, but were often battles of will and morale. When he led his army to victory over the Austrians, the triumph at the Lodi Bridge not only demonstrated his military genius but also convinced his soldiers that their commander was invincible. After the Battle of Lodi, Napoleon's fame spread rapidly. He was hailed as the hero of Lodi, and his reputation reached across Europe. Napoleon did not stop there. In the following months, he won a series of critical battles, including the Battle of Castiglione, which further solidified the French army's position in Italy. Using flexible, mobile tactics, he skillfully divided and conquered enemy forces. Each victory boosted the morale of the French troops while plunging the enemy into chaos and fear. Napoleon consistently anticipated the enemy's next moves with precision, and his decisiveness and accuracy on the battlefield made him seem nearly invincible. To Austria, Napoleon was not merely a formidable opponent but a fearsome specter who always appeared at their weakest moment, turning the tide of battle. As these victories accumulated, Napoleon not only secured his foothold on the battlefield but also began to expand his political influence. During the Italian campaign, he brought much-needed resources and spoils to the French government, greatly enhancing France's international standing. Back home, Napoleon became a hero in the eyes of the French people, seen as the defender of the revolution and the hope of the nation. On the international stage, other European powers, particularly Austria and its allies, were forced to acknowledge that Napoleon was redefining the rules of war. Under Napoleon's command, the French army not only regained control of Italy but also nearly annihilated Austria's influence in the region. The success of the campaign forced Austria to sign the Treaty of Campo Formio, granting France extensive territorial control and marking the end of Austrian dominance in Italy. Through a series of tactical victories, Napoleon secured enormous political capital and strategic advantages for France, while also paving the way for his future role as the nation's leader. The Italian campaign of 1796 was not just a military triumph, it was the beginning of Napoleon's legendary career. This campaign showcased his genius to all of Europe and laid the foundation for his future empire. Napoleon, who had once been an unremarkable young officer, quickly rose to become one of the most influential military leaders in Europe. The victory in the Italian campaign not only earned him a reputation as a hero in France, but also granted him unmatched political influence. Through his intelligence, bravery, and unyielding determination, Napoleon changed the course of history. In 1804, under the solemn dome of Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, Napoleon Bonaparte stood on the coronation platform, taking the crown from the Pope's hands and resolutely placing it upon his own head. At that moment, Napoleon was not just the leader of France, he was the center of attention for all of Europe, a figure who would shape the future of history. By crowning himself emperor, Napoleon sought more than ultimate power, he aimed to realize his vision for France, a strong, unified, and orderly nation. Although he had first risen to prominence as a brilliant military leader, his rule extended far beyond the battlefield. Under his leadership, France underwent a series of profound reforms that laid the foundation for modern France. Napoleon's reforms were broad and deep. He understood that to help a nation recover from the chaos of revolution, military victories alone would not suffice. First, he focused on law, creating a unified and modern legal system known as the Napoleonic Code. The code fundamentally transformed France's legal structure. It emphasized individual rights, the sanctity of private property, and the principle of equality before the law. During the chaotic aftermath of the French Revolution, different regions had varying legal systems, and remnants of the old feudal order left society in disarray. Through the Napoleonic Code, Napoleon unified the nation's legal system. This not only stabilized society, but also gave the French people a sense of the equality and freedom promised by the revolution. Although some provisions of the code reinforced Napoleon's own authority, it undeniably laid the groundwork for the legal systems of modern Europe. Even today, many countries' legal frameworks still reflect the influence of the Napoleonic Code. But Napoleon's ambitions extended beyond legal reform. He knew that to consolidate national strength, a strong governmental structure was essential to maintain order. He implemented a series of centralizing reforms, concentrating the nation's power in the hands of the central government. He appointed prefects, personally selected by him, to govern France's various regions, ensuring that local governments aligned with the central authority. Before the revolution, local governments were often controlled by nobles or local powers, leading to significant regional disparities and weak central influence. Through these centralization measures, Napoleon reduced the influence of local powers, ensuring that state authority reached every corner of France. By keeping power tightly in his grasp, he not only governed more effectively, but also brought unprecedented stability and order to the nation.
At the same time, Napoleon's focus on education was another key element of his reforms. As a leader who placed great importance on cultivating talent, Napoleon knew that only through a systematic education system could the nation produce a highly skilled workforce of officials and military officers. In 1802, he established a national system of secondary schools aimed at training future officers, scientists, and state administrators. In these schools, students received rigorous training in subjects such as mathematics, science, history, and languages. Napoleon's goal was to prepare a new generation of leaders for the nation's future. His educational reforms were not just about fostering academic talent, but also about ensuring the country had a loyal and capable elite. In these schools, students learned not only academic knowledge, but also loyalty to Napoleon and a sense of duty to serve the nation. This public education system not only raised the overall cultural level of France, but also provided the state and military with a steady supply of talented individuals. As the reforms progressed, the France that Napoleon shaped became stronger and more orderly. Economically, he restructured the tax system to ensure stable revenue to support the large army and the nation's development. He abolished the cumbersome tax codes of the old regime and created a more fair and efficient tax system. Through these measures, France's financial situation improved significantly, and the nation gradually began to recover economically. This series of reforms undoubtedly revitalized France, transforming it into a unified and powerful empire under Napoleon's leadership. Napoleon's reforms not only changed France, but also had a lasting impact across Europe. Under his rule, the French model became one that other European nations sought to emulate. Through his wars, Napoleon spread the code and his reforms to the lands he conquered. Many countries, even after the Napoleonic Wars, retained the reforms he had introduced, particularly in their legal systems and administrative structures. Even after his downfall, Napoleon's legacy remained in the corners of Europe, continuing to shape the development of nations. Napoleon was not only a brilliant military leader, his role as a reformer was equally significant. Through a series of profound changes, he stabilized the post-revolutionary chaos and laid the foundation for France's future development. He transformed France from a turbulent revolutionary state into a highly centralized, efficiently functioning modern nation. Although he ultimately failed on the battlefield, his legal, governmental, and educational reforms became deeply rooted in French society, serving as the cornerstone of modern France. Napoleon's reign was not only a period of personal glory but also a critical moment in which France transitioned from revolutionary chaos to stability and prosperity. The Napoleonic Code laid the foundation for modern European legal systems, emphasizing individual rights, property protection, and equality before the law. Even today, many legal systems across the world are influenced by his reforms. On June 18, 1815, at Waterloo, a decisive battle was unfolding. This battle was not only Napoleon's final military action, but also the ultimate fall of his glorious empire. The defeat at the Battle of Waterloo marked the end of the Napoleonic era and fundamentally altered the course of European history. Let's return to that moment and relive how this once unstoppable military genius, under the hand of fate, met his last significant defeat. In 1814, after losing to the Sixth Coalition, Napoleon was forced to abdicate and was exiled to the Mediterranean island of Elba. However, the defiant leader was not content to fade from the stage. In March 1815, Napoleon left Elba and returned to France. His return became known as the 100 Days. Although he had lost the throne, Napoleon still held immense popularity among the French people and the military. Along his journey, many soldiers and officers who had once served him rejoined his ranks, and the French populace placed high hopes on him, wishing for the restoration of his once great empire. In just a few short months, Napoleon quickly regained control of France and ascended to power once again. However, his restoration provoked a strong reaction across Europe. The Seventh Coalition, composed of Britain, Prussia, Austria, and Russia, formed swiftly, determined not to give Napoleon another chance and resolved to launch a combined attack to permanently end his rule. Napoleon understood that time and circumstances were not in his favor. He was up against the formidable coalition of Europe, while he had only a France that had yet to fully recover its strength. To avoid being encircled by the combined enemy forces, Napoleon decided to take the initiative. His plan was to defeat each part of the coalition forces, particularly the British and Prussian armies, in quick succession, thus eliminating these threats before turning to face the other nations. Napoleon believed that with his quick battlefield maneuvers and superior tactics, he could turn the tide by defeating his enemies one by one. The prelude to the Battle of Waterloo had already begun. In June 1815, Napoleon led his army into Belgium to face the Anglo-Dutch forces under the command of the Duke of Wellington and the Prussian forces led by Marshal Blücher. Napoleon's plan was to first defeat the Prussian army and then concentrate his forces on Wellington. On June 16, Napoleon successfully repelled the Prussian forces at the Battle of Ligny. However, the Prussian army did not collapse completely, and Blücher managed to retreat and preserve the ability to regroup his troops. Meanwhile, Napoleon dispatched forces to pursue the Prussians, while he himself turned toward Wellington's Anglo-Dutch army, preparing for the decisive battle at Waterloo. Waterloo, a small town in southern Belgium, became the battlefield that would determine the fate of Europe. On the morning of June 18, the battle began. Napoleon faced Wellington's carefully arranged defensive line. The Anglo-Dutch forces held the high ground, giving them a significant defensive advantage. While Napoleon's troops were experienced, their numbers were roughly equal to those of the enemy. Napoleon planned to weaken the British defensive lines with a heavy artillery barrage and then launch infantry and cavalry assaults, hoping to quickly break through Wellington's positions. However, fate was not on his side. First, the weather became Napoleon's enemy. The previous night's heavy rain had left the battlefield muddy, severely limiting the mobility of the French artillery and cavalry. Napoleon was forced to delay the attack, waiting for the ground to dry slightly, which gave Wellington valuable time to prepare. Even more crucially, Blücher's Prussian forces had not been completely defeated as Napoleon had expected. Instead, they successfully re-entered the battlefield during the fight, attacking the French flank. Napoleon's original plan to isolate the Prussians from the British and defeat them one by one was now completely disrupted by the timely return of the Prussian army. On the battlefield of Waterloo, despite fighting valiantly, the French forces were unable to break through the British lines. Napoleon's cavalry launched multiple charges, even engaging in fierce hand-to-hand combat in front of Wellington's positions, but Wellington's troops stubbornly resisted, holding the high ground with firm defenses. Meanwhile, Blücher's Prussian forces gradually gained the upper hand on the battlefield. Their arrival left the French at a disadvantage both in numbers and morale. As the battle progressed, Napoleon realized the situation was growing more and more unfavorable. The French positions were being compressed, and morale began to crumble. The final moment arrived. At the end of the battle, Napoleon sent in his last reserve, the Imperial Guard, a highly elite unit that was expected to turn the tide. However, even the Imperial Guard's assault could not change the course of the battle. Under the combined attacks of the British and Prussian forces, the French lines ultimately collapsed. The failure of the Imperial Guard marked the decisive moment of the Battle of Waterloo. Napoleon was forced to witness his proud army in retreat, as chaos and French routes filled the battlefield, while Wellington and Blücher's allied forces steadily advanced, securing victory. By the end of the Battle of Waterloo, the French forces had suffered devastating losses, and Napoleon's imperial dream was finally shattered. This battle was not only a military defeat but also the last major setback in Napoleon's personal destiny. Waterloo became his final gamble, but the outcome of this gamble was that he completely lost power. After the battle, Napoleon was forced to abdicate once more, but this time he would not stage a comeback. He was exiled to the remote island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic, where he spent the last years of his life until his death in 1821. The Battle of Waterloo not only marked the end of Napoleon's empire but also profoundly affected the future of Europe. After Napoleon's defeat, the European powers convened at the Congress of Vienna to rebuild the European order and attempt to restore the old pre-revolutionary regime. The flames of war ignited by Napoleon in the aftermath of the French Revolution were extinguished at Waterloo, and Europe entered a relatively stable conservative period. However, Napoleon's legacy did not vanish with his defeat. Although he lost the war at Waterloo, his reforms and legal system continued to be carried forward in France and across European nations. After Waterloo, Napoleon's legend became an enduring topic for historians and military strategists. Waterloo was more than just a battle, it was the turning point in the fate of a great leader. Napoleon's brilliant military career ended here, but his influence on Europe did not. The defeat at Waterloo became a symbol of his life. A man who had once conquered half of Europe, here acknowledged his limitations. Yet, it is precisely this kind of failure that made Napoleon's image more complex and awe-inspiring. Victors write history, but the stories of those who fail are often more moving. After Waterloo, Napoleon was exiled once again, this time to the remote island of St. Helena in the Atlantic, where he lived until his death in 1821. Though Napoleon ultimately fell, his impact remains deep and enduring. From legal codes to administrative systems, military strategy to the political map of Europe, he shaped many aspects of the modern world. Napoleon's legacy is not just a tale of war, but a story of leadership, reform, and personal ambition. Napoleon's story teaches us that anyone, with intelligence, courage, and timing, can change the world. But it also reminds us that no matter how powerful an individual may be, they can still fall to the tides of history. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time.